All right. Well, first of all, thank you for being here today. Today in the House State Affairs Committee, we're going to introduce two pieces of legislation. What we have noticed happening in the state of Idaho, specifically in the last election cycle, is what I like to call the monetization of politics. We're seeing a large out-of-state individuals that are spending large amounts of money, specifically PACs. That will be highlighted in the hearing today as well as when we have a full hearing. So the intent today is to introduce this legislation. We will probably let it percolate for a couple of weeks so people can digest it and weigh in on it before we take action in the committee. But we just want to let you know that we take it seriously when out-of-state money is being spent, especially dark money out of state. We want to provide more transparency and more clarity around those issues. And so with that, I'll defer now to the Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle.
Thanks, Brent. This last election, we saw untold amounts of money coming from across the country into elections here in Idaho. We've never seen that before. So it's our intention to do a little bit better job of identifying who's sending that money in here, where that money's coming from, what it's getting spent on. The voters deserve to know that. Sometimes we have, because of the way our laws are, there's ways for some of those folks to hide behind our laws, and we want to make sure that everybody is more transparent and they have the opportunity to learn what's going on. We also delve in a little bit on the lobbying side. Lobbyists are spending money too, and they're kind of getting around the law now, and so we're going to require them to do more reporting. We're going to require them to tell us what they're spending their money on. You're seeing that a lot with Facebook and flyers going out across the state. So again, our intention is to get the voters informed of where the money's coming from, who's spending it, and what it's buying. Thank you.
Well, I want to join in saying thank you for being here today. I think everybody has said it very well today. You know, Idaho has a real tradition of disclosure. We believe in sunshine. We believe that the people of Idaho, the voters of Idaho, should have good information. We've done that with our candidates and our elected officials for many, many years. We all have to tell you where we get the money that we use to run for office. And what we have seen is an unprecedented amount of money from out of state coming into Idaho politics. You know, the message we want to send to those folks who are not disclosing where they get their money is that Idaho's not for sale. We want to make sure that when their messaging goes out from out of state into our small communities, we want people to know where that money's coming from. I think that's important. I appreciate very much the work of our colleagues in the House of Representatives. They've put a lot of work into this. The Idaho Secretary of State has put a lot of work into this. And we want to make sure that, again, for Idaho voters, they know who is influencing their elections. I think that's a very important thing, and I think we're going to do some good work this year in the Idaho legislature.
And I think that Chairman Crane, Speaker Moyle, Pro Tem Anthem have pointed out well just the huge influx of money that we've seen in the state this past year. Behind me, you can see the $17 million that just went into legislative races specifically, and the huge influx of independent expenditures. This is the outside money that they're referring to, and specifically highlighting the biggest spender being out of state. You can see that not just influencing our primary elections and general elections, but also here during the legislative session. The biggest spender during the first month of this session is also from out of state. You can see it influencing things. Our sunshine laws were a citizens initiative in the 1970s, and it was because the public wanted transparency about who is trying to influence our policymakers. And this is really a major step forward to modernize, to catch up. What Chairman Crane highlighted is the monetization of politics. We are seeing more money, but also just new techniques, the indirect lobbying that citizens are experiencing. So what this legislation really tries to do is increase reporting, increase transparency, and to give the public a better view as to what's happening in our state, and to help support our policymakers in the work that they do so that they can do it and represent their constituents in the best way. This has been months and months of work. I really want to thank Speaker Moyle for taking the time and really working through the nitty-gritty with us to do such a transformative change in terms of our campaign finance laws. I think there's going to be a robust conversation, as the chairman highlighted, over the next few weeks regarding campaign finance and lobbying. But I think this is really a major step for the state of Idaho. And I want to also thank you guys for being here.
Do you have any questions for us?
Probably for the secretary. Could you give an example of something that's not reported today that would be reported under this
Yeah, I think, as the Secretary of State, I sit right in the center of all this activity, both regulating campaign finance and lobbying. Really, the key that we saw, especially during the primary campaign, is the frequency of our reporting. Our laws are very dated, so there are instances where transactions could be months apart from when it's reported and when it happened. And if you're the candidate on the receiving end of, say, an attack ad, and you're not going to know who paid for it or what's going on for months, or more importantly, you're a voter who gets a mailer and you want to find out who is this coming from? Is this from in-state, out-of-state, or anywhere else? There's not enough frequency. And so really one of the big things this changes is updating to 48-hour reporting for independent expenditures, increasing even more frequent as we get close to the election. So 24-hour reporting as we get closer. And us being able to use some of the new tools, our new campaign finance system, our new lobbyist reporting system, to be able to highlight those so that whether it's the media, whether it's the public, or if you're a candidate on the receiving end, which just ask Speaker Moyle about his experience, that you get to know what's happening to you and hopefully can be able to respond in that. I think one of the big topics of conversation that we'll see this session is the campaign finance limits. Our limits were set in the mid-90s. They have not been updated since then. Obviously, inflation is real, but also what we're seeing with the money in politics is also real. And so I think you're going to see a robust conversation about what should those limits be during the session as well.
You could also talk on, Secretary, about how PACs, if they're doing an independent expenditure, if that's going to go to your website so the public can see who is behind that.
Yeah, as the chairman highlighted, one of the big things is focusing on the disclosure statements. A lot of our laws, again, it was a citizens initiative in the 70s. We have these requirements, but they're vague. Everyone's familiar with the paid for disclaimer. We now have specific language, as the chairman highlighted, to make sure that a citizen, when they get it, they can easily go to the website and look up that name and find it. So just adding some of that level of detail so that people can actually trace it back. One of the big things you're seeing in terms of the attack ads during our primary cycle, the majority of negative ads came from out-of-state sources. That's a big thing. I think Idahoans have a right to know who's trying to influence them in their opinions. And certainly we have some legislative races that really stand out, and you can see it playing out this session where there's a lot of pressure. If you go to the Speaker of the Pro Tem's office, they've got stacks of postcards from some of these organizations putting pressure on the process. And so adding the transparency and the disclosure is a key part of this effort.
Logan, another thing that we're adding from the lobbying perspective is that lobbyists now during session will have to report every week. So you can see what bills are up, who those lobbyists are taking out to lunch or to dinner, and see if there's a connection between that. Again, this is all about transparency, making sure that people are seeing who is spending the money and what type of influence that they're having inside the process.
And I think just to add, and the chairman highlighted a few weeks ago when we were working on this, is the new systems that we have make it easier for candidates, easier for lobbyists to be able to report, which adds to the ability to have this frequency and to make it easier for anybody in the process to be able to see this.
I think I heard you say that there had been an uptick in this type of expenditure in the last election cycle in particular. I'm curious if you have a sense of why there was such a steep climb in that window.
That's a great question. I don't know if there's the why, other than we're seeing, I think one of the big things, nationally, when I'm interacting with other secretaries and other sources, is that Idaho is considered a low dollar state. How far a dollar goes in California, New York, or Texas compared to Idaho, they're seeing that they can have a bigger influence in our state. And so we're seeing that pressure. I think you're easily seeing politics nationalized on a lot of fronts. And so we really have, and I mean, you've got people who have served in this building a long time who can say, it feels different. This recent cycle, even this legislative session in terms of lobbying efforts, feel different than what we've experienced before in the state.
To highlight on, it's not just that Idaho is cheap, but Idaho has been discovered. And so national organizations are looking to do what? Raise money. Why do they want to raise money? Because they want to have influence. And so if they can go in and disrupt the political process inside that state, and then they can show their donors, look, we kicked 10 people out of office here, send us more money. And when I talk about the monetization of politics, what's happening with these groups, individual legislators, they're asking them to stand up and debate on the floor. They're asking them to debate in committee. They're asking them to introduce certain pieces of legislation that they know are not going to go anywhere and jam up our system. Why? So they can send that information out to their donors and say, look, in Idaho, we introduced legislative bill, whatever. In Idaho, so-and-so stood up today on the floor, send us money to fight for this bill. It is the monetization of politics, and it's absolutely destroying politics today. And that we intend to reveal who's behind it and let the people of Idaho know that there is dark money being spent in Idaho. We want Idahoans controlling Idaho policy. We do not want to have out-of-state money. And if there was any way we could regulate out-of-state money being spent in Idaho, we'd do it. But unfortunately, the Constitution has declared, or the Supreme Court has declared that it's constitutional free speech. So we're trying to put more transparency around it.
I just want to echo the chairman is Idaho has been discovered. It's not just in terms of the political money. It's people are coming here and they're bringing their politics with them. And sometimes that means the strategy, the dollars, everything else. And so we are having to be responsive. And I think to Logan's question earlier, it's just the frequency of reporting is a key part of adding that transparency so that you can know who's, if there's a bill traveling through, who's behind it and what's going on.
Kind of tie into that too. A lot of the people that are moving here are fleeing from somewhere else where it's been really bad. I mean, and they're afraid that what they left is going to happen in Idaho. So now you have these out-of-state groups playing on them. They're trying to utilize that as a source of revenue. They're not always being truthful with what's going on here. And the other big thing, and you've heard it from both of my good friends, is it's about control. And in Idaho, they feel that it's cheap to get control in Idaho, cheaper than other states. And it's a money raiser. So hopefully, with the more information out there, the voters will be more informed and we can stop some of this garbage.
Would the pro tem or the speaker, would you guys be able to talk about what sort of effect this spending has had on your respective chambers this session? Has it changed the way lawmakers are interacting with each other?
You want to start?
Well, I don't know if it's changed too much about how lawmakers are interacting with each other. I think that it's been an eye-opener for a lot of lawmakers because we have received communications from quote-unquote constituents. And then what we discover is they're actually not real people. As a matter of fact, we've had legislators who actually receive emails from themselves. So that should tell you a little bit about the dirtiness of what is happening in Idaho in politics today, where out-of-state groups actually send emails to legislators from people who are not real people. And so Idahoans need to wake up and see how this out-of-state money is really hurting the process of legislation in Idaho. It's going to hurt our policymaking, it's going to hurt our politics, and ultimately it's really going to hurt Idaho. So this is an important piece of legislation. These pieces of legislation that Chairman Crane is about to introduce, they're very, very important to Idaho.
You are seeing it affect some of the individuals. There's a lot more talk, right? Legislators are talking more now than they have about this. At the start of the session, you could tell there was some concerns and pressure because some of the stuff that had happened in the past election. Now you're starting to see individuals unify about, hey, we got to fix this problem because it's getting worse. The key, though, is legislators have figured it out, but how do we make sure that the citizens have figured it out? So the legislative atmosphere, it has changed. There's more interaction. People are in different places than they probably would be otherwise because of it. But it's actually working, I think, in the long run to Idaho's benefit because the legislators are figuring out and they'll go home and fill in their constituents. So it'll work its way out. But the key is to get bills like this introduced so the information's out there and it's easier to tell the voters what's really going on and they can see it too. When you know the old saying, when you turn the lights on, the roaches head for the halls, or the rats run away. It's the same principle. I think once people realize where it's coming from, who they are, what they're doing, and how they're being misled, I think then the voters will congeal or unify around fixing it and what we're trying to accomplish.
Secretary, this is a question for you. So I know Idaho, your guys' system is already fairly transparent, and for me as a journalist, it could be somewhat easy to use and find that information. But I'm curious, is this legislation modeled off of any other states that might even have a more transparent system, or is Idaho really the one taking this initiative?
Yeah, good question. One of the big things is, so this has been months of work, and yes, we have looked at other states in terms of their practices. There's no one state that it's modeled after. There's bits and pieces. Chairman Crane highlighted is the disclosure statements, adding that specificity so that you can easily look up the name as to who it is, the frequency of reporting, even some of the structure of how limits are proposed in this comes from examples. So the National Conference of State Legislatures, we used a lot of the information of those sources to review and say, what can we pick from other states that have seen this influx of money so that we can be responsive. I will say some of the challenges we're seeing are not unique to Idaho. Other states are struggling with this huge influx in money. Citizens United, which is the Supreme Court case that really opened the floodgates nationally, you're now seeing that trickle down to the states. The chairman alluded to it, is like, we can't stop free speech, but at the very least, we can add a lot more light to what's going on. Yeah.
Maybe it's too soon to say, but, is there a sense of, or if there's a particular issue or topic or party that, you're seeing some of this out-of-state funding coming in particularly on?
I think that it's special interest groups. It's not a political party. That's not where we're seeing it. It's not the campaigns. It's specific interest groups that are coming from different things. A topic that is obviously big a session, and you can see it in the funding, is school choice was one of the big topics that played in the primary cycle, but there's plenty of others. And so I think it's more that there are people who aren't Idahoans who are trying to influence policy. I think these folks have really alluded to that. And really, it's just us trying to be our eyes wide open in terms of what's happening here in our state.